Unthread has been an absolute game changer for us here at LeanScale and has turned Slack into our hub for managing our customers and prospects. Today we have Tom Bachant, CEO of Unthread, to walk us through the platform. Previously, Tom created DashRide, later acquired by Cruise, and has been a developer in the tech space for multiple companies. When Tom is not building support software, he is building crossword puzzles for the New York Times and making the Forbes 30 under 30 list. And now, he's changing the way companies support their customers with Unthread. Tom, thank you so much for being here. Super excited to dive in and really excited for you to show off the Unthread platform too.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Excited to walk you through it.
You bet. You bet. Well, before we dive in, I think something a lot of our audience likes to hear is, how did you get Unthread started? Did you have an aha moment? What's the story about getting it off the ground?
Yeah, so as you alluded to earlier, I've been working in SaaS for a long time. And my co-founder, Jake, and I actually started a different SaaS company about 3 or 4 years ago. And what we noticed was that all of our customers wanted to talk to us on Slack. And it sounds like, you all kind of see the same thing now. We know this is happening like across the industry. And even for a company of 2 people at the time, it became completely impossible to manage. We were losing threads. You were marking, channels as unread. Or you're using like remind me features. And so we said, all right, let's treat Slack as a first-class way of supporting customers because clearly customers love it. At the time, there's really no solution for it, so we decided to build our own.
I love it. And I think Slack has become an amazing tool. And I think it has taken like leaps and bounds beyond email. And I think everybody was sick of email and how disorganized it was and how slow it was. But then I feel like Slack just became an absolute beast on its own. And I don't know if yours looks like mine, but I'm in like 18 different workspaces. I have a million different channels. Every time I log into Slack, it looks like a Christmas tree that's completely lit up with notifications.
Oh
So
yeah.
I've personally felt the pain of struggling to be organized in Slack and be responsive. And I don't know, is that what you're seeing to be the main pain point with your customer base and people who are coming on Thread?
Yeah, I think that's the double-edged sword nature of Slack, which is that it's so easy to communicate and the barriers are so low. But that means that you're having more conversations. It's spread across multiple different channels, multiple customers, multiple workspaces. And so, yeah, that's the problem we want to solve, which is, it's if you're not using any sort of tools, doing support on Slack is sort of like doing support via SMS, from like your text message service. Like you really need something to organize all these channels, and that's exactly what we're trying to do.
That's amazing. That's amazing. Well, I know we have had a really good experience using Unthread at LeanScale. It helps us manage our customers really, really well. But I'm excited for you to show off what Unthread can do and leave our audience away with a couple of ideas of how they can use it.
Sure. Yeah. So we'll go through an example of what does support look like just in a Slack channel, where maybe you're getting, dozens or hundreds of messages coming in. You want to be able to organize these, track the statuses of these messages. We'll also talk about how you can even do your support in Slack coming from other channels. So it could be an email that a customer sends you. You want to be able to respond right from Slack because that's the tool you use every day. Maybe you want to embed in-app chat and respond from Slack. I'll walk through some of that. And another interesting use case for Unthread that we've been really focused on lately is helping companies do their internal support over Slack. So you think about this problem of, you're an IT manager at a large company. You just have people DMing you, sending messages on Slack, asking for, a laptop or a new password. That's equally impossible to manage. And so whether it's external channels with your customers or it's internal channels with, other people in the company, we want to try to wrangle this kind of beast of Slack messages into something organized and automated.
Awesome. Yep, there are multiple channels where people need help. So if we can get it organized, it's going to be pretty big.
So let's walk through an example of a Slack channel where maybe people post in with random issues they're having, they're looking for help. We'll zoom in so this is easier to see. So let's say someone, a question we might get about Unthread itself is someone says like, hey, how do I connect new customer channels, right? So as soon as someone in this channel reaches out to us, the Unthread system knows whether this is a customer or it's, another member of our like agent team. And so if it's a customer, what we've done is automatically tracked a ticket for this. If I pull open this, in this account, we've also set up AI generated responses, which is something you can do through Unthread. Let's say you run a Slack community, and you get a huge volume of support requests. Maybe you can't justify humans answering all those questions. So you set up AI as a first line of defense to kind of get these low hanging fruit type questions. In this case, we've got some docs in this. So, the Unthread bot will answer this. You can, give it whatever name and image you want to match your brand. But it still creates a ticket. Now, the end user could say, hey, this solved my problem, give a thumbs up, closes it out. This ticket has been fully resolved through AI. You don't even need to loop in a human. But in the event that's not the case, a human can now get notified that like, hey, customer has an issue and needs help. One thing that's really unique about Unthread is that all the ticketing technology is built natively into Slack. We'll go through in a second how you can actually do all this from a web dashboard. But for some of our customers, they live in Slack every day. They just want the tools right in front of them to be able to manage these tickets. So I can actually see right through this, the Unthread Slack app, ticket number 450, how do I connect Slack channels? It's in a needs response state. No one's actually gotten back to the customer yet. It's linked to a particular customer account. It's been assigned to me. And this is actually a crucial part of what Unthread can help solve is this idea that within Slack, everyone gets notified for every message, right? There's this diffusion of responsibility. Like everyone's seeing this message, it distracts everyone. No one knows who's actually responsible for getting back to you. So we help you set up these assignment rules and SLAs to say, for every new conversation that's started, basically a ticket, there should be an owner. There should be someone who's responsible for responding. And that could be a team, it could be an individual. You might want to set up escalation paths. So, maybe I'm responsible today, but if I'm out sick, I want it to go to my backup representative. All these sort of rules that follow, your just generally company workflow will help you set up such that the right person is always notified for every ticket that gets created.
I think for us, that's been a really, really big feature. So we at LeanScale, we do everything in a team approach, and you have a point person on an account, but sometimes they're not available. So that ability to then escalate it to another group and then have everybody on the same page, but still have accountability threaded throughout the whole process has been really, really helpful for us because you're right. You have a support channel where you have 5 people from your company in it. And it's like, who's supposed to get it? And then if somebody's out on vacation or something, who's next up in line? It's really, really tough to manage.
Yeah, and maybe something slips through the cracks. You want to have some sort of alert, like, hey, for this customer, we have an SLA. We've got to get responses back to them in 1 hour of business hours. So how do we set up that path? So if it's been 30 minutes, 45 minutes, let's make sure we loop in other people and just guarantee that we ultimately get a response back. What you're seeing here is also the Unthread AI system has applied a tag to this conversation for channel management. Like that's what we're talking about here. These tags help in a couple of different ways. One is just understanding like what are your customers talking about and what sort of tickets are you getting. Again, right now this is just lost in a sea of Slack threads that goes on endlessly. I'll show you. We can go through a report and see what are the most common issues that came up. What are the most common issues this week versus last week? What's our response time based on these issues? We'll be able to break this down for you. Another way this comes in handy is you might have different folks in your team who are the points of contact for different types of questions. So maybe a billing question, you want to go to the CSM or a salesperson. An API question, you want to go right to the developer team. This is where the AI can really understand what sort of questions coming in and make sure that the right person's looped in.
And I just want to clarify. So this isn't having the customer go through and click a bunch of drop-down fields to help navigate it. It's just looking at the free text and then automatically organizing it, correct?
Totally. Yeah. And we call this conversational ticketing, which, is bringing the best of what ticketing has to offer, which is giving support agents the structure they need to manage this, But from the customer's perspective, like generally we see is they don't want to file tickets. They want to have a conversation. So they just talk the way that they always do. And Unthread's going to be able to group these into tickets. So, even if Sam here like spams the top of the channel with 12 messages and doesn't use threads, starts talking about different issues, Unthread's going to be able to group those into individual tickets in a smart way. That way, they don't really have to change their behavior, but the agents now have the structure to manage it.
Yeah, I mean, it's almost become a meme of people in IT, like somebody coming and asking them something, they're like, hey, it's got to be a ticket. Like, go make the ticket. When that initial conversation just could have been the ticket in the first place.
Totally. And it's funny, we definitely started with this conversational ticketing idea. We do also support this workflow. And, it's funny, we do see a lot of IT teams who use this, where maybe you do want to collect some information from users before it reaches a human. That's an option you can configure through Unthread. Usually more for that type of use case, you might want to understand, like, if it's a laptop replacement request, like, is it dead or is it slow? What type of laptop do you have? What are you looking for? There are ways you can actually set up Unthread to collect this information, but I'll say what most people do just to get started to make it a low barrier of entry is just conversationally ticket these things.
Very cool.
All right, so we saw this is in a needs response state. Maybe we've got a couple SLAs. It's been a while, so we might even be like alerting other members of our team, like, hey, Tom totally forgot to respond to Sam, escalate up to my manager or whatever it is. But I'll come in and say, hey, Sam, let me take a look at this. Again, the system knows that I'm an agent here. Whether this is an internal channel, you'll specify who the agents are. For B2B support that happens on Slack, we can just automatically figure out like who's in your Slack workspace. They're going to be a team member. Everyone else will be a customer. And now that I've responded, what's going to happen is if I look at this ticket, it's automatically moved to in progress. And so we've tracked the response time here. This is just happening all behind the scenes. And again, the end customer is not really seeing this. So when people first get started with Unthread, maybe they don't even use the AI responses. All they do is just use this to track conversations. And that's all going to happen for you behind the scenes. So customers just feel like, hey, why this team just got way better at doing support. I'm not really sure why, but you're going to have these tools for you on your end.
Yeah, that's huge because we run into this. A lot of the work we do is like sales teams and Salesforce, but nobody wants to do the work and then go document the work that they did. So if it can just ride along with you and track everything, that's perfect.
Exactly. And you don't want to go ahead and like create, some ticket in Zendesk or go ahead and create something in, Salesforce or whatever. You want this to just happen automatically. And that's where this conversational ticketing comes in. Now let's say, I'm an agent here. I'm managing all these support channels. And like you said, you might have hundreds of these channels, thousands of these channels. I think our biggest customer now has about 5,000 customer channels that they track on Slack. And obviously that would be impossible pre-Unthread, but what we'll do is just pull out only the relevant conversations that come to you. So, shows that you can actually scale this up as you get that big. But, I'm managing all these channels. I don't know what's open, what I need to deal with, how do I actually keep track of this? What we'll do is through the Unthread app, expose an inbox view of the tickets that you're responsible for. So this is where this idea of assignment really comes in. Like, I just want to look at what are the threads that I need to deal with. I mean, sure, I could dive in and see all the threads across the company, but what's most important is like, I got to deal with these tickets that are assigned to me. I see I have one from 10 months ago that needs a response. That's pretty bad. That's probably well over our SLA, but we'll come back to that one. I can see that 8 minutes ago, Sam asked me about connecting customer channels. It's still in progress. I totally forgot to get back to her with the answer. So from this inbox, I'll just click in, bring up the thread right in the right-hand panel, and then say, hey, found the answer, try this, right? Now I've given her the answer. I'm going to go ahead and just close this out. Now it's done. And now I'm also going to track the resolution time here. So again, all these like support metrics that currently are lost in Slack because without the structure of a ticket, you don't really know when you've responded to something, when you've closed it out. We'll go through some analytics on how you can like dive through all this across your different channels.
One question on that. Because I feel like this happens with us. If what you sent doesn't fully satisfy their question and then they come back in that thread, does it reopen the same ticket and help keep everything together?
Yeah, exactly. So let's say Sam's not too happy about this. We're going to go ahead and reopen this ticket. So if they say something like a thanks or that worked, we'll just keep the ticket closed. Everything's good to go. But again, through this AI, we'll be able to detect when a ticket has been reopened. And I can see here it's been reopened because of a reply in the thread. So let's pull this up. I can see Sam says, hey, that didn't work. What the heck? And now if I look at the ticket, it should have reopened it. Now it's in progress again. I really need to deal with this. So yeah, you can be sure that you close things out when you think they're done. If the customer disagrees, it'll just reopen it for you.
That's awesome. That's really big.
Some other quick things you can do in Slack that you really want are things like emoji reactions to control certain actions. So I could use this checkmark emoji that's going to close out the ticket. I could apply a thinking face that can generate an AI response to this ticket. Whatever sort of workflows you want to set up, you can customize all these things. But again, the idea is like you're in a Slack channel. How do we give you the tools to really quickly manage and close out these tickets?
Awesome.
All right. We'll also talk about this idea of collaborating with your team on these tickets. So if I'm in this conversation with Sam, maybe I need to ask my engineering team. I need to ask the sales team, whatever it is, say, what's going on here? How do we fix this problem? I can't have that conversation in this thread because Sam is in this thread with me. So Unthread is this concept of triaging, which means taking the conversation with the customer and cross-posting it over to an internal channel where now you can have a private conversation about it. So these triage threads are really special in that they'll, post the details of the ticket. It'll live update to show the status. So, if I do reopen this message will update to show that. And now because I'm in an internal channel, I can be like, hey, Eng team, what's up with this? Is this a bug or a feature, whatever it is? And this conversation is going to be tracked to that ticket, but more, private only to our team.
That's really, really big because same thing. We run into the similar concept where if you're working on complex support or complex projects, then you're going to have to engage a team behind the scenes. And it's always like, oh, let me DM them. Oh, let me open up another channel. And it's fully like bifurcated from the ticket or conversation that's going with the customer. So you always have to like reconcile that at the end. This is a super smart way to keep tickets connected, but also give you an opportunity to collaborate with your team. This is brilliant.
Yeah, totally. We see this DM problem all the time where maybe you figured out the solution in a DM, you close out the ticket, then someone asks the same question and you're like, okay, we closed this ticket, but what was the actual conversation we had about it? Like, what was the answer here?
Right.
Cool. So what we went through is people can manage their entire ticketing workflow from Slack. As I mentioned, some people who scale up have hundreds, maybe thousands of channels. This becomes less less scalable. You don't want to be even just scrolling through and looking at all these channels that you're managing. So the Unthread web app is a way to basically take all your Slack workflows and operate them through a web dashboard where we're going to be able to add in a lot more functionality here. So if I open up my inbox view, you'll see these are the same tickets we saw on the Slack inbox. These are all the things I'm dealing with. I can even see this ticket from 13 minutes ago where Sam had asked me about connecting customer channels. And you'll see here from the dashboard, this is an exact recreation of what was happening in Slack, all the way down to even emoji reactions. We can even sync in custom emojis. So we got fun little GIFs with, colorful dancing things.
And we need the LeanScale logo one too that we have. So we need to make sure we have that one in there.
Exactly. Yeah. And you can even set up that custom logo to kick off some of these custom actions. So yeah, a lot of cool stuff there. So you'll see, 14 minutes ago, she reached out asking about this question. Here's where the bot came in and gave an answer. And then here's my response. And, Sam, reopened the thread. I can actually look and see, like, let's look at the trail of changes. Like I could see when it was moved in progress and reopened. And then the triage thread is also linked here. So this is that key part that's special about these triage threads, which is like all the internal comments are going to be synced here. So, attributed directly to the ticket itself.
Yeah, that's big. So in this view, I see you can make internal notes. So if you put in your internal notes there, does it stay within that triage thread?
Yep. So let's do that. Here's another internal note to the Eng team. We'll send this from the dashboard. Now maybe I'm a support rep. I'm managing a lot of tickets. So I'm going to use the dashboard because it's easiest. I've got keyboard shortcuts. I've got all this kind of stuff at my fingertips. But my engineering team, I know, will absolutely not use a dashboard. They only live in Slack.
Yeah.
So that's fine. If I pull open this triage thread, it's going to post that message back into the Slack thread as me. So from their perspective, maybe they don't even know that Unthread exists. That's totally fine. They're just responding to messages in Slack the way they always do.
That's so clean. So clean.
And we're going to handle things like attachments, code snippets, all the type of stuff that you're used to sending on Slack. We definitely have a lot of technical teams that are, collaborating with engineering teams, sharing code blocks, things like that. All right. So from the dashboard, we're also going to give you, as I mentioned, a lot more flexibility over these conversations, even down to the level of browsing your documentation as you're crafting your response. So in this case, the AI generates response, but let's say we don't have the AI. I want to be the person to give the response, but I want the AI to help me out when I do that. You can just go ahead and ask the AI for the answer to this question. So how do I connect customer channels? It's going to go ahead, query all the docs that we've connected to Unthread, which you can do instantly. And it should generate an answer that I can use in my response. Okay, great. This looks like the right answer. It's got a link to my knowledge base article about this exact question. So let's go ahead and add this to the draft and then send it off to the customer.
That's pretty.
You can also.
Sorry, Tom. I just want to take a moment to pause on how smart that capability is. So that's taking a look at all of the support documentation relevant to your business, relevant to your company, what you've uploaded. This is the corpus of information it can go through to generate a full response, and then you can send the documentation out after that. I think it's one thing to be able to, hey, let me just search through what you have and then link a potentially relevant article, and hey, let me search through and then generate a intelligent response for you. That one, it saves the agents a lot of time, but two, just make sure like you can make the most of the documentation you have.
Yeah, and sometimes even I'll use this to fact check myself. Like maybe I think I know the answer to something, but let me fact check this with the docs to really see what the answer is before I hit send.
Yeah, I'm sure the agents working with this love that. I don't think we've taken advantage of this feature as much on our end, but definitely something we would find value in.
Yeah, and I mentioned that oftentimes you're going to have these questions that get repeated. We'll also help you take those questions and the answers, which again, we can identify just through these threads, and help you add that to your knowledge base. So, maybe you're sick of answering this question about how do I connect channels. And if I didn't have docs, I could take the content of my answer and use it to generate an article for future use for other customers.
Nice.
Some other things you can kick off here, we integrate with all the major task managers. So I could link, maybe I want to create a task for the engineering team to work on a bug fix. I can link that here. That is going to actually show the status of this ticket in real time, sync to the dashboard. And, maybe this is a feature request that's going to be done, a month or a quarter from now. That's actually fine. I can connect that task, close out this ticket on Unthread, and I'll be notified whenever that task is eventually done. You'll get a DM from our Unthread bot being like, hey, this task that you're waiting on is finally done. So you can go ahead and let the customer know.
Very cool. Yeah, it's tough when you have like multiple teams, they're working in different systems, but just connecting with all of them so you can bring the right information back to the customer makes it so much easier for anybody on the front lines of the customer.
Yeah, exactly. And on that same note, for a lot of CSMs and sales folks who are running these channels with maybe prospects or folks who are early on in the sales cycle, we can also sync these conversations over to your Salesforce or your HubSpot, whatever CRM you've got, and understand like what's the stage of this account, what's the status. Let's make sure that anyone who's more of an enterprise account, we're prioritizing support for them, and we can set up different SLAs for that.
I know this is a very specific, maybe a niche use case for us too, but we're always trying to look at how much activity it takes to move a sale along or move an upsell along. And there are a lot of great tools to get your Zoom conversations into Salesforce, your emails into Salesforce, your meetings into Salesforce, which is great. But 90% of our work happens in Slack. So we may have a couple emails up front, but for our sales process and a lot of customers that we work with, we're trying to get people into Slack as quickly as possible because we know deals move faster if you're operating in Slack.
Totally.
But historically, I mean, there's no good way to get that data into Salesforce and seeing, well, how often are you slacking? Like, who's slacking back and forth, and attributing that activity to deal success hasn't been possible until we've used Unthread.
Yeah, and when we were building out the first version of Unthread a couple of years ago, we talked to a few sales teams who mentioned that they were hesitant about setting up Slack channels with customers for this reason, that it's a bit untracked. It's sort of like the Wild West. There's all these conversations happening. No one knows really what's happening. So yeah, that's exactly right. Like if you're going to adopt Slack for this process, which is going to lead to faster close time for deals, even higher close rates, because you just have a more personal connection with that prospect, you're going to need this ability to understand exactly what you're talking about, reference back to previous conversations in a really, structured way.
Yeah, we see deals close way faster. So if you have an opportunity to both track it and set it up well for the prospect, I think it's a huge opportunity.
Yeah, totally. I mean, if you if you see every Unthread customer that we've got has a channel, we've got a channel with you all where we love just collecting feature requests, bug reports, whatever it is. Yeah, it's just a great way to form a close relationship with folks.
For sure.
All right, so here we looked at the ability to handle Slack tickets. As I mentioned, what Unthread can do is also handle tickets across any other, channel that they're coming through. A channel is kind of a vague term here. It could be a Slack channel, it could be email, it could be an in-app chat that you've embedded on your website, and it could be something like Microsoft Teams, which we know is a big challenge. So Slack was one of the first chat tools to open up Slack Connect to let you talk to external organizations, over their same tool. Microsoft Teams also released that feature shortly after, where now your customers might be Teams customers, and they're used to sending Teams messages to talk to their vendors, but you don't want to create a Teams account because we know the UX there is a little bit more challenging than on Slack. So what we'll do is we'll help to forward in these Microsoft Teams messages into a Slack channel and allow your team to respond to these Teams messages either from Slack or from the web dashboard. And from your customer's perspective, again, they're saying the tool that they use every day. They're going to stay within Teams. They're going to get their responses back in Teams. But your team is going to be able to use the tool that you're more comfortable with, which might be Slack or it might be the web dashboard.
No, that's so huge because one thing, a challenge that we run into is we operate in Slack, and you said it, not me, for whatever reason why we operate in Slack. But then we have customers on Teams. And so we'll have people, like it's not reasonable to have somebody say, okay, I'm going to log into multiple chat applications and make sure I'm monitoring multiple and have like multiple organization systems across each. So to centralize that all into whatever you're using, it's not even manageable without something like this. It's not even something that you can do.
Yeah, I mean, you're going to just forget to open Teams that day and go in and check all the, threads that you need to respond to. It just ends up kind of like slipping through the cracks.
Right. Which happens. Until we started using Unthread, that's exactly what would happen. Because you'd have one customer on Teams, 9 customers on Slack. It auto-logged you out because you hadn't logged in a couple days or something, and then you just forget. Yeah. And then somebody emails you 2 days later like, hey, how come you haven't responded to this?
Yeah, and, Teams and Microsoft has a pretty high adoption rate with a lot of these major enterprises. So these are often accounts that you cannot afford to ignore, but right. Without the right tools, it's too easy to.
Right.
Cool. So let's dive a little bit into the analytics section. So again, maybe today you've got all these different channels, you've got Teams messages flowing in, you've got Slack messages, you've got your email support. What we're going to do is give you a single dashboard to track all these different tickets and some data associated with each. So let's quickly look at things like, all right, in the last 90 days, let's look on a weekly basis. What's our first response time? Looks like we had some pretty bad spikes. I could look at this down by the assignee and see who contributed to this. I would bet it's me. If I look over here, yes, I in fact slowed down our response times this week. For some reason, it took me 500 minutes to respond to one of these customers. But yeah, the idea here is you'll get these insights to really understand like where are you dropping the ball. Maybe even for individual customers where you have specific SLAs, I can see it was actually for every space support that I really dropped the ball here. So if this is a big enterprise, this is an account where you have strict SLAs with, this is a problem I need to know about so I can address it. The last thing I'll jump into is the tag-based analytics. So the idea here is, again, you are talking about all these different issues across these different channels. I want to see what are the main things that people are talking about. And I can see for the month of July, the number one question we were getting was Zapier. So what this means is maybe we don't have a great experience in the web app about this. People feel like they have to ask us questions. Maybe we don't have good docs on this, so they need to ask us directly. So this is a pretty clear indicator that we should step in and do something. Similarly, you might want to identify which tickets are taking the longest to resolve. So, maybe you only get a few tickets for this particular type of issue, but it's taking your team a long time to actually get to a resolution. That's an indicator that you probably don't have the right internal processes. And if I look at this, it looks like hardware issues are taking the longest to resolve. So maybe what we need is like switch our hardware vendor. Maybe it's taking way too long to get these laptop replacements out. This sort of data is going to help you make sure that from the customer's perspective, like it's not just the first response time that matters. Like you actually have to solve their problem, and that's going to be different depending on the type of issue you're solving.
Yeah, and this again, not even possible to do with all the different channels coming in, unless you're using Unthread. So nobody has access to this type of data unless they're on your platform. So I know it's been a really major enhancement for us in how we operate, and we can clearly see, especially SLAs on first response resolution as well, but just seeing across different team members who's responding quicker, slower, and then also helping us craft what the SLA should be. So we may have an idea on paper of, hey, SLA should be this, but nobody's meeting it. So maybe it's not even reasonable, and we should set a different expectation with our customers and not sign up for things that we can't commit to.
Totally. You can dig into these threads and also figure out why. Like, were they reopened several times? Here's another ticket that came in. Was the problem that, we thought we had the answer, but it was really, we had changed something in the app and not updated the documentation? Like, you can actually like even dig in and find out like on a more granular level, like what is the reason behind us not meeting these SLAs?
Yeah, that's so smart. And it's just data that can help you make so many good decisions moving forward.
Totally. Now, I mentioned we talked about taking tickets in from Slack, tickets in from email, in-app chat, Microsoft Teams. As I mentioned, a lot of our newer customers are using us for internal support. So we have IT teams, HR teams using Unthread to run all of their internal ticketing for employees. So, you want to talk about your, paternity leave, you can submit a ticket to the HR team. Now, you're not going to do that in a public Slack channel. You might want to reach the HR team directly. So another thing that Unthread can help these teams do is intake tickets directly from the Unthread bot. And this is going to do everything from like triaging your request, like figuring out exactly what you're asking for, and then relaying to the right team where they can respond right from there. So I can go in here and actually maybe ask a more private question like, hey, how do I set up my paternity leave? I'm going to be a new dad, so how do I make sure I'm checking all the right boxes? The Unthread app can also talk to this internal HR documentation that you have. Give me the answer, tell me what steps I need to take, and fill out a ticket for me that's going to go ahead and talk to my HR representative and finish whatever they need to do.
That's amazing. That's really, really big.
So I can see here, we've got some docs on this. So to set up your paternity leave, you got to inform your manager about the time you need to take off. Okay, great. And here's the ticket that I'm going to fill out, a parental leave ticket. In this case, this follows that flow we talked about earlier, where for an HR ticket, maybe they do want to collect some information before we go ahead and file this with the team. So let's hit confirm. And it might ask me some other questions like, okay, it did say I need to inform my manager. So this is a required field. Has my manager approved? Yes, they have. And now that I've passed these steps, now it's created a ticket for me. So I didn't have to go through and fill out like a Jira form. I still just like talk to the bot to do this. And we're going to help out the HR team because they don't want to have to ask me afterwards, like, hey, did you get approval from your manager? I'll give them that information ahead of time. And now this ticket has all the information that they need to go ahead and finish the job.
Right. Yeah, it's helpful on both sides. Like, I don't want to have to fill out a ticket. I want to just be able to talk to somebody, see the process, and then to have this fully organized for your HR team saves so much time.
Yep, exactly.
One random question, Tom. I know this happens to us a lot. How do you organize DMs? And sometimes, you may have a customer where you have a channel set up and they're okay doing that, but then maybe they have a close relationship with one person on the team, so they feel more comfortable just sending them a DM. How do you guys organize those and Unthread as well?
Yeah, so we can help to turn those DMs into trackable tickets as well. The idea here is it's going to also provide some visibility for other folks. Like maybe you're handling a bunch of tickets through your DMs and no one sees what you're doing. Like these answers are just kept hidden from everyone. But these are actual like customer interactions that you want to track to Salesforce, that you want to track your response times for. So in these channels, what we do is this conversational ticketing where we just detect when they send you a new message. For DMs, we don't automatically detect these new messages. And the reason for that is more of a privacy reason. We
Mhm.
don't actually request the ability to read your DMs. It's just not something we want to have access to. So we purposely don't request that permission from Slack. But instead, what you can do is when you get that DM from someone, like someone says, hey, can you send me that report? You can still use the Unthread app, click this manage conversation link, and let's create a new ticket for it. And I can attribute it to the right customer. Maybe this, I know this is my hammer mill customer. I'll assign it to myself. I can still apply tags and priority levels. But this is going to create a ticket for it in the Unthread system. You'll see it in your dashboard. And now you'll have both the trackability here, as well as like the visibility for other folks on the team to see it.
Yeah, that's awesome because I know a lot of stuff gets lost in DMs. And I think it's smart. Yeah, you don't want every single DM, but the ones that do need to be associated with a customer to be able to do that is really, really important.
Yeah, and that's exactly why we don't do this automated ticketing in DMs. Like, not all your DMs should be tickets, whereas a lot of these messages in these channels should be. So we let you just kind of manually indicate, like, all right, this is a thread that I want to make sure is tracked within the team.
Awesome.
All right. Yeah. What else should we go into here?
I think this is a good overview. I think this is really good. I know there's a lot more features and workflows and automations that you can set up, but I think for those kind of seeing it for the first time, this hits the bread and butter. I would ask, since we have the CEO going through it with us, what's what's next for Unthread? What's on the vision for the future? What are you guys working on that you think your customers are going to love?
Yeah, for us, what we're super excited about is this notion of understanding what is the right answer to your customer questions. There's this problem that we see across all companies, which is, yeah, we can sync in your documentation and generate an answer for you. ChatGPT can do that too. Like that's not something that's really special. But we're in a unique place where we understand which of your answers actually resolved the issue. We know what answer was the right answer for the customer, and we can know whether that is covered in your docs or not. We can know whether, maybe in your docs you said to click this button on the left, but the design team moved that button over to the right. And so your answer in Slack was click the button on the right. We can detect this and we can actually update your docs for you automatically. And there's something really game changing about not needing to update your docs anymore. I think every team, whether it's internal support or external support, faces this pain point, which is you want to move fast, but it's just not a sexy job to go in and make sure your documentation is up to date. So we want to be able to do that for you just by understanding what the answers are to your questions.
Updating documentation is unbelievably painful. And unless you have somebody whose sole job and purpose is to go update that documentation, it doesn't get updated. So if
And
you
it's a thankless job. The people who go in and make sure that you're stringently updating every single line by line detail, that's just there's not a lot of glory in that position. But we think that there should be something really meaningful about actually focusing on this problem.
I think automating that, streamlining it is a huge opportunity. And I think when people see the benefit of being able to leverage that updated documentation in lowering response time, lowering resolution time, making customers happy. I mean, the support you provide for customers is strongly correlated to growth, revenue, NPS, evangelism of your product. So if you can give your customers an amazing experience, and I know documentation sounds boring, but it plays a huge role in being able to do that, you'll see the benefits in your company's growth.
Yeah, and I think there's a future where documentation is not boring. Like there's so much potential now with, LLMs constantly getting better. Maybe even within your application, someone wants to know, hey, how do I find this particular button? Now that we've understood previous questions, you've answered, we could even tell you that instantly within the application. You don't need to go read through documentation anymore. So there's really this exciting, thing happening here where we just see the idea of documentation, changing a lot.
That's awesome. Well, Tom, I just want to thank you so much for walking us through. Unthread has sincerely been a huge help for us here at LeanScale, and we're excited about everything that you're building, and we're excited to use it. And I know a lot of our customers and a lot of our audience would greatly benefit from leveraging Unthread. So I know we're going to put a link in the video to get in touch with you and your team. So if they're interested in using Unthread, they can get connected. But yeah, any way they can get connected with you, or what's the best way to follow you and what you're up to as well?
Yeah, I'd say find me on LinkedIn. I should be the only Tom Bashant out there. Maybe there's one other, but should be easy to find. This face is recognizable. So follow me on LinkedIn. I'm going to be posting a lot more content about, what we're building, what's on our roadmap, what do we think is the future of support and of ticketing, with LLMs in place. And you can also just email me directly, tom@unthread.io. I'm sure I'm going to get a ton of spam for this, but maybe that's worth it. Yeah, just reach out to me directly anytime.
Maybe you could filter them all out with Unthread. Well,
There you go. That's what I'm talking about. Yeah.
well, Tom, thanks again. Can't wait to have you back, and love everything you're building. Appreciate it.
Of course. Thanks, Anthony. Appreciate it.